You've got to focus in on what it meant to you. That's what the admissions committee wants to know. Did this person get it at all?
You guys, it's Ask the Dean, episode 2. We're so excited.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and go to the background so these guys can get to Ask the Deaning, and I'll be helping monitor these comments and around if you need me, and have fun.
Indeed, we will.
Sweet.
Awesome.
How you doing, Dr. Scott Wright?
I'm doing well. How are you, Dr. Ryan Gray?
I'm doing fantastic today.
Good.
I'm excited for our first kind of private Ask the Dean in our Mapped group. It's amazing the response to Mapped and what we've been building now for several months and what our vision is for it. We're like close to 500 people have signed up. So I'm
that's awesome.
about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you if you're watching this, if you're participating in this live right now. Thank you for allowing us to be that guide for you and trusting us to be that guide. So,
yeah, we've got people from all over the country.
All over. Tennessee, California, Minnesota.
Texas, woohoo!
Texas, whatever.
There's a couple of Florida people too. So.
Yes. All right. So really, this is your opportunity to ask questions. You watching this, participating in this. These shows are going to morph into whatever they morph into, but the idea behind them is really just to answer your questions and to get as nuanced and as specific as possible to answering your questions and your pain points and just guiding you along the way. So ask your questions as we go through this. Ask away. And Rachel had commented earlier about private versus public, and some people we see your name. I don't know, Rachel, just another kind of admin note. I don't know for people how they know if they've given permission. Basically how they know if their name shows up. So without really knowing that, basically say, like, when you ask your question, just like if you want it anonymous, just put anonymous in your comment too until we actually clarify and can give better directions. So why don't we just for today, Rachel and Scott, we'll just keep everyone anonymous. We don't need to flash the questions up on here. So with that, we have our first question here. Wondering what your thoughts about the take Dr. Gray has on the seed idea in the personal statement writing. Right off the bat, you're going to try to pit each other against, pit each of us against each other. So the question basically is, Dr. Wright, do you think Dr. Gray is dumb for the way that he tells people to write his personal statements?
Well, so that's a good question. And no, I don't think that he's dumb. I think that there's my take on.
Or let me pause for 2 seconds. You do have the book.
I do.
Have you read it?
I have read part of it.
Okay. All right. So just to give a little context, he has the book and he's read some of it. He understands the idea behind it. There we go.
Yes.
Right, continue.
And what I think is that there are a lot of different ways to start at writing a personal statement. And basically, there is a genesis moment. There is a moment where you take something out of nowhere and you put it into actual writing, and you begin to, using this sort of gardening metaphor, you use water. You water this idea. You fertilize this idea, and you let it kind of begin to blossom. And so I think that for all students, regardless of what technique you use to write your personal statement, to begin that process, you have to use a process that makes sense for you. If it's Ryan's, process that he illustrates in his book, then that's great. I think it's a great way to begin, and a great way to sort of track your way through the writing of an essay. I think you may have another idea of a way that you want to do it. But I definitely think that regardless of what you do, there's a point at which there's a starting point. There's a genesis point that's going to expand into other things. And I like the idea of, and this is where tracked really comes, where tracking your thoughts and stuff, and really where mapped comes in a lot. Because for students who are, let's say, beginning their process with mapped as a freshman or as a sophomore or even as a junior, sometime before they get to the point where they're beginning to write their personal statement, you've got a lot of information in there, and you are tracking classes, you're tracking experiences, whether they are medically related or extracurricular or whatever. You've got a lot of these experiences that you're using, and I think the thing that happens often is you pull from those experiences, and you even pull phrases that you used, for example, in mapped, and you'll be able to say, I love that phrase, the way I put that. I want to include that in my, this is a part of pulling from a lot of different things to begin the process of putting together what's going to eventually be a personal statement, an essay. But at the very beginning, it doesn't look like an essay. Yeah. It's just a seed, or it's just a brain dump, or however you want to sort of conceive of it. And so, yeah, the short answer to your question is use what makes sense for you. But most students are going to need some sort of initial structure to help them figure out, how do I even begin this process? And that's where I think Dr. Gray's book comes in really handy with giving you that structure. Now, you may follow that structure beginning to the end, or you may start off with that structure and then punt it and go somewhere else with it, with your writing process. And that's okay too. I think that it's very much an idea of you making sense to you, but using structures that will help you kind of get your head around it.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the one thing that I don't give enough context around is the fact that the ideas that I have in my book are not the only way to write a personal statement, right? They're the way that I've come to enjoy reading. It's the way that I've learned what it actually works for telling a story and for students to understand how to tell their story, right? Just using normal storytelling techniques. It's not really a secret to the personal statement, but it's just storytelling in general, whether it's a novel, a movie, or whatever. I think probably, if I want to even dissect even further, is that a lot of the ideas in the book, some of the best ideas probably are more around what not to do, right? The very cliche, the very kind of overused things, versus the way to do it, I think potentially is a better way to think about it as well. But those books don't sell as well. How not to write a personal statement. All right. So let's go to, and Rachel, if you do want to moderate, it looks like a lot of the questions coming in are from anonymous users, so we can throw those ones up there too, and just maybe avoid the non-anonymous users, if you were planning on moderating at all, but that's okay. All right, here we go. Are admissions committees sensitive to the reasons behind the lack of clinical experience that non-traditional career-changing students may have compared to their more traditional co-applicants? Are non-trad students considered a little differently in that regard? So, Scott, from someone who has had that experience, both from a TMD SAS perspective and gathering all of that data, and now TMD SAS actually has that non-trad question in there.
Right.
And from the director of admissions standpoint, really the question comes down to, number one, how how potentially is that data seen that a student is non-traditional? And then from the admissions committee side, how do you take that into account?
So yeah, and that's a really good question. And I think that, traditionally, non-traditional students were seen as students that are old, that are 20, above 25 years old. In other words, it was traditionally all defined as age. So if you were older than 25, then you were considered non-traditional, which I think that the medical schools are really trying to expand the notion of what non-traditional really means in some ways, in terms of recognizing that somebody who's younger than 25 could frankly be somewhat non-traditional in their pathway. But I think more times than not, when we talk about non-traditional students, what we're really talking about is students who have not done the traditional 18, straight out of high school into college, straight through college for 4 years, applying their junior year, after their junior year, going into senior year, and then they're going to go straight from college to medical school. So that's the sort of traditional pathway. So anything that sort of deviates. Now, I would say that gap years are becoming much more common. I would not say that they're typical, but they're more common now than they used to be. And just because you take a gap year doesn't really necessarily pop you into that sort of non-traditional sort of population of applicants, I think. You would still often be seen as a traditional applicant if you took a gap year to do something, really interesting, or, whatever you did during the gap year, and then you came back and applied or whatever. So really, to the question is that this issue of clinical experience and what the challenge that non-traditional students often have, which is they're working full time, or going to school full time and working part time, or working full time and going to school part time, and they just don't have a whole lot of room in their schedule for a whole lot of shadowing, or so that their experiences may be seen as somewhat less, or they worry that their experiences, the amount of experience is less. And I think what you have to focus on in this conversation really is that it's not about necessarily the amount of time you're spending doing something. What is really crucial is what you're getting out of it and how you talk about it. It is the value of it to you, the meaning of it, and how that meaning got created, and how you communicate that meaning to an admissions committee in your application. So you may only have, you may be comparing yourself with, let's say, maybe a total of 40 hours of shadowing and some volunteering and stuff. And you're thinking, wow, there's these other applicants who have hundreds of hours of doing all kinds of different things. But I've seen so many applications where a student had lots of experiences and has no clue what they did, has no idea the magnitude of what they were doing or what it meant to them, what the value of it was, why they were even doing it. They could talk about the task-oriented questions that they did, the tasks that they did, but they could not talk about what it meant. Yeah. And so I think the value is really, to an admissions committee, is more about, what did this mean to you? It's what I like to call the so what versus the what. You did volunteering, you did shadowing. That's the what part. The more important issue is the so what part. Who cares that you did that? Everybody does that kind of stuff. We want to know what difference it made in your life, what you got out of it, the meaning of it. And so that's where I think you have to focus yourself as an applicant. So regardless of whether you only have 40 hours of medically related experiences or 300 hours of medically related experiences, you've got to focus in on what it meant to you. That's what the admissions committee wants to know. Did this person get it at all? Did they understand what they were doing? Did they see what was going on around them? Did they pay attention to the relationships, to the issues that were all around them? Did they get it at all, or did they just sort of see, oh, he gave that person a shot, or that person's going to go to surgery, or whatever? So that's what admissions committees are looking for, and that's where you have to find your the power of your application. If you're limited in the number of hours that you've got or the experiences that you have, you focus in on that value. That's the important part.
I'll add just a brief snippet based on a conversation I had with another dean of admissions at a different medical school. Specifically, it was myself, him, and a non-traditional student, and she was asking, like, I have a family to take care of, I have food I need to put on the table, a roof to keep over my head. I don't have the time to dedicate to shadowing and clinical experiences and research. Well, does that get taken into account? It was really the question, and then probably a little bit behind this question as well. And the dean of admissions at that school was like, of course, definitely.
Yes.
We see all of that, which is why it's good. A lot of students forget to put jobs and other stuff in their activity list that they think may not be related to medicine, but it just paints a better picture of who you are and what you've been doing, and so that the admissions committees can go, well, their hours are a little bit lower than what we normally look at. Oh, but look, they work, and we can most likely tell that they have a kid if they didn't talk about it, and all this other stuff. So definitely all of that gets taken into account.
Absolutely it does. Now, I will say this. I have seen both traditional and non-traditional applicants who will say in their application, I'm very busy. I'm working, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I don't have, I'm in classes a lot, and I don't have time to do a whole lot of health-related experiences. And so just as you said, Ryan, that's, taken into account. We look at the whole picture of who this student is. However, if I look at your application and I see that you have 10 or 15 hours a week to work out in the gym, then, or to play with your band at some, to practice with the band or whatever. So you have to be careful to recognize, not only in your application, but in your life in general. You can't say I'm super busy and then have time to go play soccer 3 times a week. Yeah. That's not going to fly.
Yep. Cool. All right. Good question. Out of the hundreds incredible pre-med students you interview, how do you figure out who is right for your school and will make a great physician? That's a good question, right? So as an admissions committee, how are you all sitting around going, how do we frame our questions? What sort of information are we looking for? Who are we looking for in a student for our class?
Yeah, and this is going to vary pretty considerably by medical school. These days, medical schools have very different ways of interviewing students. Some schools do the traditional interview method, where it's 2 faculty members, or perhaps a faculty member and a community physician. Or some schools use medical students or residents to interview students, but they're very traditional. It's a 30-minute or so interview. It could be structured or non-structured. In other words, structured would be they're told what questions to ask. Non-structured would be they can ask whatever they want to. And then other schools use the multiple mini interview, where you go to different stations, and there are ethical or social dilemmas that are presented, and you have to respond in a very short period of time to what the scenario is. Some schools use a mixture of those two. They may use multiple mini interview, and then they may have 1 or more traditional interviews. So within the context of noting that every school kind of does it differently, I think that what medical schools are looking for in an via interview experiences are a variety of things. One of the most important, I think, is, can you actually carry on a conversation? This is a very crucial part of what it means to be a physician. You're talking to people. You are carrying on a conversation with them. And you have to come to a point where you can make that person feel comfortable with you. We hear over and over again, and most of us in our lives have experienced going to a doctor and being totally frustrated because the doctor, you didn't connect at all. Yeah. I've had experiences with my children or whatever, where we went, and I had one where I went to an orthopedic surgeon. My daughter had hurt her leg through a soccer accident, and literally we were in the examination room for probably 20 minutes while he was talking to us about the injury. He did not look at either one of us eye to eye the entire time we were in that room. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And it was very frustrating. We felt like he looked at the ceiling, he looked out the window, he looked at the x-ray, he looked at everything else except us. And so, in other words, the interview experience, what the admissions committees really are looking for, they know a lot about you. The interview is not to find out information about you. Yeah. The interview is to find out, are you a real person? Is there somebody there that can connect with me? And more about the mission of the institution. The admissions committees get a lot of information about mission orientation and how well you fit that through the secondary application. But they may be exploring that as well. But they want to see, can you talk? When I used to interview medical students, pre-med students for medical school interviews, we had a non-structured way of interviewing. So I asked and a lot of the different questions, and I would rarely ask medically oriented questions. I would most often, if a good example would be if the student put in their application that they played the trombone in the orchestra at their college. I might want to talk for 10 or 15 minutes just about the trombone and why you chose the trombone, and how you like the orchestra and what you get out of that. And I just want to find out, who are you? Can we connect? Can you talk? What is your language like? Is it intelligent? Is it, what's that all about? I want to get to know you. And so I think a lot of the interview is about that kind of thing.
Yeah. At the end of the day, what I typically tell students is, as the interviewer is sitting there, they're picturing you as you mentioned, taking care of your kids, taking care of your loved ones. Yeah. Do I want this person sitting across from me to take care of them? Yep. And really, at the end of the day, that's ultimately the goal is interviewing and finding somebody who I want to be around and have take care of my family. So,
it's absolutely right.
Yeah, they know how smart you are. Obviously, MCAT, GPA does that. You don't need to have medical knowledge. That's what medical school is for. They're going to teach you that.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Yeah. Good. Exactly. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. How important is an applicant's undergraduate institution? I love this question. Scott, should I go to Harvard or to my local state school where I got a full ride and we'll know? Harvard's not a good, Harvard has lots of money that they give students too. But
that's true.
A very expensive private school or the full ride to my state school?
Yeah, we get this question a lot. This comes up a lot. We used to, medical schools get this question through, we often get this question from parents and kids who are in 10th or 11th grade, and they're trying to figure out where they want to go to school, and they are looking at a variety of schools. So this is not at all uncommon. And the question is really about fit, I think. You have to go to an institution that fits you in terms of the undergraduate institution, your college experience. And, if you have a number of different options and you're looking at school X, Y, and Z, and maybe school X is, like you said, a really top-notch private institution, and school Y is sort of the local state institution, and whatever. I think you have to consider, where do I see myself? Where do I feel comfortable? And the same question, I feel like, often comes up within the context of major. What should I major in? Should I major in biology? Because I really want to major in psychology, but my mom says, no, you have to major in biology. That's what medical schools want, and stuff like that. And so I think the same thing applies there. You study what you want to study, because ultimately that's where you're going to do best.
Yeah.
If you want to go to the state school because your best friend's going there, and because you really connected with it and it sounds cool, and then go to the state school. If you just are super intrigued by the Ivy League school, or private school that want to go to, then go there. Medical schools do not, there's always been this myth that there's some sort of formula, and that the medical schools alter your GPA based on this formula.
Yep. And
the formula has within it a modifier for the type of school you're coming from.
Yep.
So if you went to a really hard, what's considered a really tough school, then they're going to modify that GPA accordingly. That is not the way it works at all. Is
it out of the ordinary? Is it completely like there's not one medical school that maybe has a couple bonus points in their rubric for a school that they know just doesn't curve, or they like a major, for instance, that they know students really struggle with?
So what I think happens is on an individual basis, not for groups. No, so everybody that goes to Harvard gets a bump. No. But if individual Johnny Smith went to whatever school, let's say St. Olaf's, private school for brilliant kids or whatever, and that was and that's known as a really tough school. Then on an individual basis, then the committee may look at, in terms of a holistic process, they may look at that individual student and say, well, this student has a 3.4 GPA, but we see they went to St. Olaf's, they studied molecular biology, or whatever, or chemical engineering. It's the engineering majors that are sometimes really very taxing, both in terms of the time commitment, but also in terms of the type of information that you're studying and stuff like that. It doesn't mean engineering is the only majors that are like that, but you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so they may, on that individual student basis, say, okay, we're gonna give this particular student a bump because of X, Y, and Z. He went to X school, he studied this. Another good example might be that he was a varsity athlete, and he played on the St. Olaf's football team, and he was a starter, and they've got lots of commitments and stuff, and we liked that he committed to that, and they learned from that, and all the qualities that he took away from that. But it had an effect on his GPA, so it wasn't a 3.6 or a 3.7 GPA, but it was a 3.3 or a 3.4. And so on that individual student basis, we're going to say, yeah, we like this guy. We really are going to give him a bump in our process. So I don't think that there's an algorithm that does that. I think it's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, definitely. So Scott, do you know what I say about picking schools?
No.
Okay. So
tell me.
Here's what I say about picking schools. I say don't go to a great school. Go to a school that will make you great.
Absolutely. I love that.
That's
and that could be St. Olaf, or it could be Podunk State University.
It could be the Derek Zoolander Center for Kids Who Can't Read Good school.
Yeah. Yes. Or for a lot of students these days, in particular, it's beginning at community college. Yes. And it's going to community college for a couple of years and then transitioning into the local state university. because that's what you can do financially.
Let's talk about that, right? That's a question we get all of the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's perpetuated on SDN and Reddit and everywhere that medical schools don't like it when students go to community college. Community college classes are easier, and they know that you're playing the game to increase your GPA.
Well, I don't agree with that. I don't think that medical schools have necessarily these broad generalities about anything, really. I think that, again, they're looking at an individual student, and they're trying to figure out who is this individual student, what is her story, and why did she go to community college to start off with, and if it's clear that she's working, she's living at home, she's community college is all she and her family can do, and she does well in community college. She transitions to state university, or maybe a private school, and she's able to be consistent in the level of grades that she's making at the upper level courses in the 4-year institution. Then that's what they're wanting to see is this whole picture of who is this student, what are they all about. And now, what I don't recommend necessarily is a student who is at a 4-year institution and goes home for the summer and goes to community college and takes science classes. I do not recommend that. I would say if you're going to go home for the summer and need to take classes during the summer, do it in non-science related courses. Pick up history or political science or English or psychology maybe, or other courses that are general electives or general education courses. And particularly if it does become clear that you are at a 4-year institution and that you are trying to go somewhere else, such as a community college, to take physics because you think it's going to be easier there, then absolutely they're going to see that. They're going to see through that a mile away. So, don't do that. And some students try to play the game like that.
It's very similar to what's been happening with COVID, right? This whole pass-fail question.
Yes, absolutely.
And students are like, well, I should I go pass-fail? Should I not? And really the answer is, what is your whole breadth of classes? Right. What does that story tell? Right. The admissions committees aren't looking on page 3 going, oh, look, you ran to the community college and you went and got an A. But when they zoom out and look at the whole story, it's, well, you got an A here, an A here, an A. Like your whole story is A's. Absolutely. It's not going to be that big of a deal. But if they can tell based on the story that you're struggling in your 4-year university classes, and all of a sudden you have these community college classes that are A's, then the question is, well, what is going on behind the scenes there? It's the full. I always talk about it's not the micro stuff that
it's the macro.
Schools, it's macro. What's the
big picture? Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Awesome.
That's exactly right.
All right. Thoughts on including your kids in your personal statement? Does that make adcoms nervous that you might not be able to succeed in medical school? So, Scott. I always like to asterisk these kinds of answers with, look, humans are reading these. Humans have biases. Humans may have woken up on the wrong side of the bed because of their kids, and we're like, you can't go to medical school with kids. I can't even be a faculty member with medical school with kids. But so with that,
I think if it seems obvious in reading your application, it's somewhat gratuitous that you're including mentions of your children in your application, then that's going to be weird, and they're going to be like, what's up with this? It just seems to come out of nowhere for no reason at all. But on the other hand, if you, in your personal statement, or if in one of your other essays, you, such as a meaningful experiences essay or something like that, where you're talking about that, one of your children had a terrible chronic disease, and that part of the reason you want to go into medicine is coming from that experience, then it makes total sense.
Yep.
And so I wouldn't shy away from that at all. But it's exactly what we're just talking about. It's not necessarily that micro part of it, that micro story in one of your essays. It's the bigger picture of what is this whole thing all about? What is this applicant all about? And what are they trying to do? And what does their picture look like? And if that picture includes children, and it makes sense to include mentions of your children in your application, then I wouldn't shy away from it. You have to be true to yourself ultimately, and want to give the picture of who you are to the admissions committees. Then if part of that is your children, then absolutely include it. But again, if it seems kind of weird or whatever when they're reading it, then that may be a red flag for a whole different reason, not just the fact that you have kids.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So another question that just came in with COVID and everything going on. What are your general recommendations for students right now who may have had their shadowing stopped, their clinical experiences stopped? It's just like the whole world has stopped. So a lot of students are both worried for their applications now, but also moving forward for applications next year, the year after.
Right.
What this hiatus is going to look like from an application perspective, but also asking, what can I be doing right now?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I think that the admissions committees are going through COVID just like everybody else is. Their medical students are going through COVID. Their medical students have had to stop rotations, have had to, shut down a lot of things, and it has affected everybody. And so the admissions committees aren't on some other planet. They realize what's going on. And so I think largely my advice is for students, particularly those who are applying this year, there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, there are some remote internships that you can do, but in terms of real experiences, that's going to be a bit of a challenge, I think, to get some of those. There are not a whole lot of remote or online internships that you can do. And I sort of wonder about the value of those, particularly within the context of healthcare. If you were going to business school or something, you could do a remote internship and work on some project or whatever. And absolutely, it'd be, fine. But in terms of the people-oriented health professions, it's a little bit different story. And so I think you have to just take what you've got and go with it. And the admissions committees are aware. They know what's going on. They understand what this is all about and the limitations that it has placed on everybody. And so I don't think you need to worry about that, too much. Now, I would say, if you are applying this year, like right now, you're in the process of applying, and you waited until March, you waited until spring of your junior year in college to start getting experiences in healthcare, some few months ahead of your application, then that's a whole nother question.
Yep. It goes back to the micro macro thing, right?
Yeah,
what is the whole
absolutely.
Story?
Absolutely.
And I think that's where a lot of students, they go through this process, and that's where I hope MAPS really gets people out of this mindset, is they go through this process going, okay, I got to focus on my grades. Okay, my grades are under control. Okay, I have to do a couple hours of shadowing. Okay, I've done that. Okay, now I need to do this, and now I need to do that. And they go through this whole process of check. And instead of like, let me live, let me be who I am, let me prove to myself that this is what I want and get these experiences
and let me explore. Let me,
explore
the world around me and see what this is all about. Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit of uncomfortable topic right now, talking about volunteering and shadowing and what can students be doing. I've been getting a lot of questions from students who are out protesting right now, rightfully so. And they're scared about what happens if I get arrested. right? What will that look like? If I get arrested, will I have to answer these questions on the application? Will the medical schools understand that I was out, not just out for fun, but out protesting injustice in this world? What do you think? How do you think schools are going to deal with that when a student potentially applies and has an arrest record because of these protests?
Well, I think, again, the medical schools are not living in some vacuum somewhere. They are, many medical schools, perhaps the majority of medical schools, are in urban areas. They may be experiencing the protests in their own neighborhoods. They may be caring for people who have been somehow wounded in or hurt in the process of these protests. So the medical schools know what's going on, and they see this all around them. And I think, again, what is most important is, if you got arrested or whatever in a protest, then yes, you would have to put that on the application. Most of the applications ask if you were not on. I know that they often ask if you've been arrested or charged with a crime or whatever. And you have to look at the language pretty carefully, but also I think you have to be just upfront. But what they give you an opportunity to say is to explain that. Yeah. And again, what you have to do is really talk about what is the bigger context for why I got arrested. I was protesting, racism in our society and in our community. And as a part of these protests, I was arrested because I was, there, and they arrested a whole bunch of people, and I was one of them. And so I think most of the medical schools that I've ever had contact with, most of the deans of admissions that I know, they're going to connect with this sort of idea of social activism. I mean, there is a social quality to being a physician. And physicians have a role in our society to take care of people, but also to be on the forefront of being leaders in our society. And I think that medical schools will connect. Now, having said that, if you get arrested because you're looting Target, then that may be a little bit different story, So, but most of you, hopefully all of you, are not going to be looting Target. But yeah, absolutely. I think, again, Ryan, it's just what you just said. You live your life, and you let the things that are important to you pour out of you. And if that means you're out protesting, then you do it. Yeah. And you do it wholeheartedly, and you do it because you care about it.
And let's extrapolate that and go, okay, so let's say I live in Texas, right? Texas, not known for being the most liberal state. Mm-hmm. I live in Texas. I was in Austin, UT Austin, very liberal town of Austin. Yep. I was out protesting. I got arrested. I maybe wasn't convicted, but I'm going to have to answer yes, I got arrested. If you apply to all the Texas schools and one of them goes, oh, we don't want them, they're just going to be a troublemaker. Well, guess what? They just did you a favor, because the next time that you want to go raise your voice and speak your truth, and the school tries to say, hey, like, Sally, you're not allowed to do that. That doesn't represent our values here at our school. You don't want to be there anyway. So
right. That's
okay. And that's so exactly, as you're going through this process, understand that the far majority of schools are going to be okay with you protesting. They're going to love that you protested, obviously, non-violently and not looting and all of that stuff. But the far majority are going to be okay with that, and they're going to understand that, especially right now. And the ones that don't, too bad, they're lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is very near and dear to me. My oldest daughter was at a protest here in Austin on Sunday, was hit by a rubber bullet, and has a huge contusion on her lower leg.
Those things I didn't realize how big they are.
They're big, and they hurt. And this was a ricochet. It wasn't even straight on. It was a ricochet, and it is still, she's had, a real painful experience with it. So anyway, that is just to say, we all live in the same world. You know, the medical school admissions committee people are watching the news just like you are, and you know, some of them may be out protesting is just as well. And so, you know, I think you can't live your life thinking, what is this going to look like to the admissions committee? You got to live your life and be you.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, episode 2 of Ask the Dean in the books. So many good
Woo!
questions. So much.
Yeah, there's always
stuff.
so many that we can't get to, and I feel bad about that. But
that's all right. We are around. We'll be in the group trying to answer questions as well. But Monday we're going to be back in our kind of normal time slot. We're going to do these on Mondays at what do we say? 5 Central, 6
5
p.m.
Central.
Eastern?
Yep.
Yeah.
5 Central, and so every Monday we'll be here. So if we didn't get your question this week, then or today, then we can do it this coming Monday or the following Monday or whatever. So.
Or whenever.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Awesome. I love it. Again, thank you for everyone watching this. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel or on Facebook, on social media after these, you can be part of Mapped. This private Facebook group is only for pre-orders until we go live. So if you want to pre-order whenever we go live, we're hoping to go live in the fall of 2020, whatever that looks like. If you want to pre-order Mapped.
Not very far away.
Yeah. And then you can come join in these live with us. So, Scott, absolutely. I appreciate you. I'm glad you didn't take my seed writing, personal statement writing to shreds. First question was a good one.
Well, I do have a fireplace, and I'm thinking kindling here. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally joking. That's total joke. Total joke.
Well, awesome. Thank you for everyone watching and participating and asking questions and whatever we can do for you here at MAPS, let us know.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.